A juror hands the bailiff a folded note. It's Monday morning, August 17th, inside a Clark County courtroom. Ingrid Stokes has just stepped down from cross-examination. A woman who, 30 years ago, was driving the car directly ahead of Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight when the shots came. She's told the defense that no one screamed Tupac's name that night. That night looked relaxed behind the wheel. That Shakur wasn't hanging out the window, chasing attention, the way legend has always told it. Then the judge reads the juror's question aloud. Could Stokes tell which direction the gunfire came from? Her answer, no. 2 words. And in those 2 words, 30 years of assumption about that intersection, about who saw what, about how certain anyone in that car could really be, just got smaller. That's week 1 of the Duane Keffe D. Davis trial, and it's already reshaping the case. Opening statements set the terms first. Chief Deputy District Attorney Binu Powell told the jury this wasn't a whodunit in the traditional sense. Davis never fired a shot, and the state isn't claiming he did. Powell called the killing an act of revenge, and said Davis carried visceral anger toward Shakur for years after the September 1996 beating of his nephew, Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson. Then Powell played video of that beating for the jury, Shakur and his entourage, caught on tape, jumping Anderson in a casino hallway hours before the shooting. The prosecution's opening witnesses weren't there to prove Davis pulled a trigger. They were there to build the scene. First up, Gary Dale, the Las Vegas Metro officer who pulled over Knight and Shakur earlier that night, the traffic stop that put a timestamp on where the 2 men were and how they were behaving in the hours before the shooting. Then Ingrid Stokes, the driver ahead of them. Her account matters because it's one of the only surviving descriptions of the mood inside that BMW in its final minutes. Calm, unremarkable, nothing that suggested anyone in that car expected what was coming. Then Brent Becker, a retired Metro homicide detective who testified to something that's dogged this case for 3 decades, how hard it was to get Knight to talk. The night of the shooting at the hospital with Shakur dying and Knight himself wounded, detectives tried to interview him. It took days. Becker's testimony wasn't dramatic. It was foundational, establishing on the record why so much of this case relies on Davis's own words instead of Knight's. Defense attorney Michael Sanft didn't waste his cross-examinations pushing back on facts. He used them to strip away atmosphere. With Stokes, Sanft asked a precise, almost surgical set of questions. Did anyone yell Tupac's name? Were fans crowding the BMW? Was Shakur exposed or agitated? Every answer came back no. That's not an accident. The prosecution's case leans on the idea of Davis as a man consumed by rage, hunting a target. Sanft is quietly building the opposite picture. A routine night, an ordinary intersection. Nothing that marks this as the calculated hit the state says it was. In his opening, Sanft went further, telling jurors the state's case runs on a lack of facts, a phrase built for a cold case. Nearly 30 years, a dead lead suspect in Anderson, an unreliable memory pool. That's the terrain the defense wants to fight on. Not what happened, but how confidently anyone can still say what happened. The prosecution's real weapon isn't a witness. It's Davis himself. Powell told the jury directly, "You will learn that from Duane Davis himself," a reference to Davis's 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend, and the interviews he gave in the years after, where he described obtaining the gun, riding in the Cadillac, hunting for Knight and Shakur that night. That memoir is the spine of this prosecution. Every witness this week has been laying track toward it, establishing the beating, the timeline, the traffic stop, the wounded silence from Knight, so that when Davis's own words hit the jury, they land inside a fully built scene, not a vacuum. The defense's counter isn't to deny the book exists. It's to reframe why it exists. A man selling a story, dramatizing his own myth, decades removed from anything he could be expected to remember with legal precision. Whether that argument survives contact with Davis's own recorded voice is the fight this entire trial is going to be. A remote witness closed out the week's early testimony, a former investigator, appearing over Zoom, who once worked the 1997 murder of Christopher Wallace and had received information back then that Davis might be a suspect in that case too. It's a strange, ghost of another case moment, and it signals how far back the state is willing to reach. But the real headline is still ahead. The supplemental witness list names Marion Suge Knight himself, currently serving 28 years in a California prison, and on record telling the entertainment outlet TMZ in 2023 that he'd never testify. Also listed, Tupac's sister Keffe Shakur, his stepbrother Moprim Shakur, and Reggie Wright Jr., the former Death Row Records security chief who Davis has named, in his own past statements, as the man who organized the hit. The prosecution needs those names to hold together what the memoir started. The defense needs every one of them to hesitate, contradict, or simply not remember. 30 years ago, almost no one could say for certain which direction the shots came from. This week under oath, the answer was still no. If you haven't seen how this case sat cold for 27 years before anyone was charged, that's video 9. Go back and start there.